talk about SQL instructions. So nothing but like we'll try to understand more about the SQL language, which is widely used across the databases, right? So for someone who don't know what is database is a software that is used to store, modify, and retrieve the data in a meaningful manner, usually in the form of tables, which consist of columns and rows where the data gets stored. Uh, so to work with the databases, there is a language that was created called as structured query language, SQL, or it is also pronounced as SQL, right? So there are thousands of commands that gets executed every day in the database. However, all these commands are categorized into five different groups, as you can see on the screen. Like first one is DDL, which stands for data definition language. This is basically to create an object where you can store the data. Let's say that if I want to store employees data, first I should create a table with the name employees, and then I can store the data, right? So to create that object, I have or to create that table, we have to use DDL language, inside which we have six different types of commands, which we'll talk soon. And then we have DML. So let's say that we have created the table and then we wanted to store the data now, which means like we have to first insert the data. Storing is nothing but inserting the data into the table. In this case, we use a group of commands called data manipulation language. So the first one is data definition, which is to deal with the data structures, and the second one DML, which is to deal with the data within the structure. And the third one, DCL, which stands for data controlling language. This is basically to decide who can see the data and who cannot see the data, right? That's why we call it as data controlling language. And the fourth one is TCL, transaction controlling language, which is nothing but like, whenever we insert the data, should it be permanently stored in the database or not? So in this case, we will use TCL. So we have something called commit and rollback. We'll talk more about it. And then the last one, DQL, which stands for data query language, and it is also often referred as DRL, data retrieval language. Underneath this, we have select operation basically, and then CTE, which stands for common table expression. So this is used to retrieve the data from the table, right? So now we know what are the different types of that can be performed. When do we need to use what kind of commands? DDL to create the structure, DML to update, delete the data, DCL to decide whom to grant the access so that they can see the data of the database. And then TCL is whether to store the data or to roll back the data, whatever we have inserted, so that it can go back to the previous state. And the last one is TQL, data query language, right? So now within each group, again, we have set of commands as we can see here. The first one is create. For example, under DDL, the first one is create, which is to create the structure. As I mentioned earlier, if we want to store the employees data, first we have to create a table called employees. So to create the table, we'll use the create command. It's like create table name. So we'll talk more about it later on. For now, just remember that create command will be used to create a table. Then we have alter, which is to alter the table structure, right? Let's say that you have created a table and then you realize that there is an issue in one of the column name and then you want to change it or you want to correct it. Then you can use alter command followed by renaming to rename the column. Or let's say that we have added a column and instead of character we have given the number data type, and then we realize that like we have given the wrong data type, because of which we'll not be able to store the data. Then if we want to change it from number to character, then again we can use alter followed by modify to change the data type or data size. We'll talk more about it later on again here. And then drop, which is to drop a table, or like let's say we have created employees and then we have employees one, for some reason we have created it and then we feel like I don't want the second one, I just want to drop it. Then I can use drop command to drop. So this drop can also be used along with the alter. Let's say that you have added a column and then you realize that the column is not needed any longer and it's taking the space. In that case, you can just use alt table name and then drop column and then column name so that it can drop the specific column. So in this case, we are going to use alter and drop together. The next thing is truncate, which is to truncate the table. Let's say that we have created an object and then we have inserted the data. Then we felt like this data is not useful, instead of dropping and recreating the table, we truncate and remove all the data. Then we can use truncate operation. However, in this case, truncate actually removes the data. It is not making any changes to the data structure at named under DDL, and we'll talk more about it later on. So the next one is rename. So rename is, as I mentioned, like let's say that we have in which we have a column name change and stuff, like maybe let's say that employee, instead of giving two e's, probably we have given one e, and then we wanted to correct it. Then we can use rename command. So this will be along with alter statement once again. So we'll say that alter table name, and then rename column to the new column name however we want. Or we want to rename the table itself, then we can say that rename table and then old table name to the new table name, right? So a rename command can be used uh, alone to rename a table, or it can be used along with alter statement to rename a column. Similarly, drop can be used to drop a table, or it can be used along with alter to drop a column, right? Or to add. We have comment, which is to comment the table structures or the columns, to specify what kind of data is table is going to store and what kind of data is stored in a given column within the table, right? So in those cases, like we can use the comment, and these are also stored within the database. We can always retrieve, look at what this table, what kind of data the table is storing and what kind of data the column is storing, and based on that we can understand, right? Then the next part is DML, which stands for data manipulation language, as I mentioned earlier. So here we have four commands: insert, update, delete, and merge. So insert is to insert the data. Let's say that we have created employees table, and now insert an employee details. Then we will use the insert command. And once we insert, then we realize that like there is some change that needs to be done to the existing data. Then we will use the update command. Then we have delete, which is to delete again from the table. And the last one is merge. Merge is like it can perform all insert, update, delete operations together or individually part of one single command itself. Always remember, one command means one statement which is terminated by the semicolon. Any command that you write, if you put the semicolon, that means it has been terminated. So if you want to perform insert, update, delete together, then we have to write merge. Part of one single statement, we can perform all three operations. If we want to specify only insert and update, and we can specify those two as well part of merge statement, but we cannot run insert and update part of same command without merge operation. We'll talk more about it later on again. Now, talking about DCL, data control language, as I mentioned, let's say that we have created an employees table and we felt that there is some sensitive information that should not be exposed to everyone. And so we wanted to limit the access to the employees table to set of people. So we can grant access only to those targeted people using the grant command. And then let's say that we have granted access to a set of people. We realize that the access has been by mistake given to other people, and we wanted to revoke their access. Then we can use revoke command to roll back that access, right? So the next thing is TCL, which stands for transaction control language, as mentioned earlier. So commit is like, let's say that we have inserted an employee's data, and then we wanted to say that persist the data forever, do not delete it on your on the database on its own. Then we can say commit. The moment you say commit, it gets stored in the database, it will not be lost. However, if you insert the data and you forget to commit the data and the connection has been reset, then it will roll back. So rollback is nothing but taking the table structure to the previous state is called as rollback. So always we have to use commit if we want to permanently store the data, or we can use rollback if we want to set the table status to the previous state, so that like what are the changes we have done in the data to the table, it is not stored permanently. The last one, as I mentioned, DQL stands for data query language or data retrieval language, within which we have select statements. So this is what our bread and butter we use every day to keep selecting the data, doing some analysis. What kind of data do we have? Maybe like to identify how many people are there in the department, or like who are the highest paid employees, or who are among least. All this kind of analysis, when we want to do, we use the select statements, right? So for this video, And the part of next video we'll talk more about DDL using practical examples. Maybe we'll try to create the table. We look at the syntaxes, what are different options we have while creating the table, and what is possible, what are the restrictions if we want to change the data sizes, data types, or we want to truncate a column, what kind of, sorry, we want to truncate a table, or we want to create a constraint and all. We'll talk about all these things part of next video. Until then, take care. Bye bye.